I'm calling the Administrative Services Committee meeting of October 5th to order. Roll call, Mr. Acosta.
Here.
Mr. Rizek.
Here.
Ms. Spades.
Yes, here.
Ms. Altoff.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Kearns.
Here.
And Mr. Collins said he was going to be available online, but I don't see him on yet. I have a motion to allow him to come on whenever he does.
So moved.
By Ms. Altoff, second by Mr. Acosta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so he'll be on. We do not have minutes today because the person who has been transcribing minutes is on vacation. We will get to them.
Maternity vacation.
Maternity.
Huh?
Maternity leave.
Maternity leave. Oh,
Which is a
well,
much
you know,
better
I do a little
excuse.
longer.
So we'll get them in a couple of months.
Yeah, they'll eventually be here. Did anybody sign in for public comment? I doubt it, looking at the people in the room.
No, sir.
Okay. Members' comments. Anybody have anything for the good of the board here? Don't all jump at once. I don't have any separate presentations or new business. Can we go to routine consent agenda? Who would like things off? I'll hold a new record here. Can I have a motion?
I'll make
to
a
approve
motion
the-
to.
Second.
Thank you.
Motion by Ms. Altoff, seconded by Mr. Young to approve the routine consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Oh, no, I gotta do roll call because it's got money. Yes?
There's one item to be removed.
Oh, that's right. We're not finished with, which number is it?
It would be 7.5.
7.5.
I amend my motion then.
7.5, because that is not going forward today. It's not ready.
I amend my motion to exclude 7.5 then, please.
I'll second.
With Mr. Young's consent. All right, then I still have to do a roll call because we're spending money and things, I think, someplace in here, so. To approve the routine consent agenda excluding 7.5, Mr. Acosta?
Yes.
Mr. Rizek?
Yes.
Ms. Bates?
Yes.
Ms. Altoff?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Kearns?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Again, I still don't see Mr. Collins online, so. That brings us to a first discussion item, summary of employee forums.
Yeah, we had, Cheryl's got a better summary, and I'll let you do most of the talking, Cheryl. I called Cheryl last night at home, I was like, remember, we got this on the agenda. But we did 4 employee forums in September. I think in total, we had about 64?
73.
63?
73.
73 employees visit. We did 1 in this building, 1 in the courthouse, 1 in Valley High, and 1 at DOT. And it's something we have kind of an organizational history of doing since Cheryl's been here, but we've had to take a couple years off because of COVID. The forums typically follow the annual employee survey that we do, and we did that in late May, early June, and so kind of distill what are the issues that employees want to talk about, what changes in benefits, and Cheryl's always got some good reporting on changes that we've made. So we try and spend the first 20, 25 minutes delivering some messages and then spending the back half of the hour listening and capturing all that.
So some of this we emailed to County All as kind of a summary to all the employees who couldn't be at the forums so that they could kind of get a feel for what was brought up during the forums. It was interesting, some of the phone calls that I received. I was like, well, if I would have been there, I would have said,
Of course.
okay.
Of course.
We weren't. So again, one of the things, some of the stuff that we shared with them were trends. So I've kind of been asking a set of similar questions over the last 4 or 5 years and looking at the trends and which direction we're going and how do we then address some of the trends. And most things were pretty stable. There was an increase in the number of people who are encouraged to work on their self-development, which is really good because that's one of the things that we've been trying to focus on is you're here, we want you to stay here, we want you to stay up to date on skills and knowledge in your field. And we kept pushing out the student loan repayment and the tuition reimbursement programs, which people still aren't taking full advantage of, but those who are benefiting. So that number had gone up, which is good. Another one that went up is, this one's not so good, I have considered leaving the county in the last year, and that's one we would have anticipated, because people are leaving positions and going to other places, and it went up 2%, so it went to 46%. So 46% have considered leaving the county in the last year.
And what does consider mean? You know, that's a question. Does consider mean you think at night, boy, what if, or does consider mean you went and interviewed at Algonquin?
Yeah.
Can I ask, next time, can we ask if that number is still, can we ask if they are looking on their own or if they've been tapped? I'd be real curious to see if there's a difference. I mean, with some of our more professional, trained people, if they've been approached by an outside entity, or if they're just, you know, if it's an answer like, yeah, I'm thinking about it.
It would be your professional staff that get approached. We know our IT staff get tapped on the shoulder.
Right.
Our engineers get tapped on the
I just think
shoulder.
I think that's important information to kind of make a distinction, and if that level changes drastically, that also speaks to
I know some of our
me.
engineers got tapped and
Yeah,
went to the private sector.
I would just, you know, it's just one of those things I think that makes
Yeah.
a difference in how you move forward and perceive things, that's all.
So we kind of looked at some of the trends of things that were happening, and we talked about things, the major topics that came up in the survey, and so that was our presentation. The major topics that came up was the whole thing about flex scheduling and working from home. They got a taste of that during COVID. We had been talking about it, trying to get departments to consider it, and we were gradually getting there, and COVID was like, boom, you're there. And some people really liked it, and some people did really well, and some didn't do so well, and some positions just don't work. So we talked a lot about work from home and flex scheduling, and part of what came out of the survey is people are like, it's not fair that she gets to do it and I can't. It's like, well, it's all really dependent on your position and your department operations, and the decision lies within your department. It's not a county decision whether or not you get to work from home. So that was an interesting conversation. Again, employee development and training came up beyond this. Do I get self-development? Am I encouraged to self-development? There was a lot of talk about employee development and training and education. People wanting more training and advancement. So we've talked about that at the department head meetings. Kathy just gave me some really good news. We just did a supervisor training on team building, which was the big topic supervisors wanted this year, and that was supported by the employee surveys. So we just did, I forget how many classes, it was a lot. Over 100 people were trained on supervisory team building your team.
We trained our trainers, so Kathy was one of our leaders.
Yeah,
we had a dozen people kind of learn how to lead these classes.
Yeah. So that was really good, that was really helpful. Whew. And what came out of that is people want more. And they want to take it from the supervisory level, they want to take it to their team level and have those discussions. And we heard from DOT that they had a very good experience with a program called Know Your Colors?
Real colors.
Real Colors. And Kathy and Dewan, who were two of the facilitators, did some research and some digging and connected with DOT, and the state DOT is going to train all of our staff for free.
Oh,
We
nice.
just found out. Woo! So that's gonna be a big project that we're gonna take on, so we'll do it like department by department, classes of 15. So that's the next level of our team building training that we're gonna do.
Is
Yeah.
that it's kind of an offset of Myers-Briggs?
Very
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes.
found it to be really, really positive.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what the
except for the
DOT
gold
people said.
people. They had a hard time, those gold people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think DOT said they still hang their color outside their cubicles. So as you enter their cubicle, you kind of have an idea, oh, okay, I'm entering the space of a red person or a blue person. How do I
That's wonderful.
take this conversation forward with them? So that's the next phase, and again, Kathy just told me this morning that their state's gonna do it for us for free. So we just gotta
That's
set it
great.
up, make it happen. So that's the next level of training that we're gonna do countywide. But again, we've really encouraged the department heads at the department head meeting to, when you have those annual discussions with employees and you talk about development, really follow through with your part But what we talked with the employees about is, if it's about your self-development, you gotta initiate that. You can't sit there and wait for somebody to say, don't you think you would like to take some classes? You know, so it's about, employees need to come forward and say, I really would like to, and don't just sit and wait for a department head to tap you on the shoulder. So we've talked a lot about that at department head and employee forums. Compensation is always a big topic. The survey was done pre-comp study. The results, might be a little bit off, but there still was some discussion at those meetings about compensation. There's some frustration from people who have been here for more than 10 years and the fact that we only took them to the midpoint of their scale. So that was kind of a repeated point. We found out through employee forums, and we had another meeting with health department staff, that it seems like there are still people who are doing work beyond their current grade. And I'm like, well, I don't know that unless somebody tells me. So if you feel like you're doing the work of 3 different grades because those people left and they're not gonna replace them, you need to talk to your supervisor. Supervisor needs to come to me and let's regrade your position.
Or they're having trouble replacing them. So this could ring with some merit in some situations when we are so short-staffed that we have people doing
More than one job. So some of that frustration bubbled up in those meetings, and we kind of made sure people understood, if you feel like you're doing work beyond your current job description, bring it through the ranks and let's look at it.
Particularly if it's an extended period of time, to your point, you know, if you're not being able to fill up somebody's position and
Yeah.
now it's become like a regular
Yeah.
assume that that's what you're doing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's,
Yeah.
Regraded.
Yeah,
that
yeah.
creeps sometimes.
I
It creeps over time,
recognize
and
that,
then,
yeah.
but you also can, we felt like in some limited instances, a little bit of smoldering, you know,
Sure,
yeah.
I get that.
There was some smoldering. And then we got into the wellness program, and again, health insurance this year, again, we're pretty much flatlining again, except for the HMO is going up 5%, but, and we talked about some of the survey results were, this wellness program, I didn't even know it existed, and I didn't realize that I was getting this incentive, because it's like $12.50 a paycheck, so they feel like they don't recognize it, they're not feeling that incentive. So the wellness committee met with Northwestern, who does the program, and said, how do you do this with other communities so that people really feel it, and it invites other people to participate? And they said, again, do it at $300 the day that they do the testing. And so we talked about that with employees, and at the forums, it was like, yes, that's gonna work. If I can walk out of there with a $300 Visa gift card in my hand, that's gonna be great. And then it was interesting, this is where I got some phone calls where people were saying, I'm not gonna do it if you do that, because I don't wanna pay taxes. I'm like, well, then don't take the gift card. I mean, you still can take the test. I mean, there's good results that come out of the test. I mean, if you don't wanna pay any kind of taxes, I mean, so anyway, so that was kind of interesting. Like, I don't want the gift card. I don't wanna pay taxes. Like, okay, all right. I'm trying to think if there was, I think that's pretty much it. We presented all the results. We went through and said, well, what do you think? Again, working from home.
We kind of did the update for all of our elected officials and department heads at our September meeting, so I think we're on pretty good track.
Yeah, the one other thing that came out, and we had a lot of good discussion on this, was we have 3 organizational values, and I don't have it in here, which was accountability, respect, and integrity. And we said if there was a 4th one, what would it be? And communications. 47% of people who responded said communications. And so we spent some time in the forum saying, what does that mean? What kind of communications are you talking about?
Yeah, and that's an easy conversation to start, because is it communications within the department? Is it communication between the departments?
Yeah.
That's also important, or is it communications to the residents we're serving? Letting them, know about our challenges, our successes, all that. And each one has merit, and each, depending on who you're talking with, there's more priority placed on others, but.
And it kind of,
It does emphasize that we can't communicate too little.
and Pete, you've already taken one of their recommendations and incorporated it into your newsletter.
Right, that was a comment on the email that I'm doing on the first Monday of each month to staff to highlight activities of the county board that impact
Yeah.
employees. And so that's gonna be our new thing. We did it this Monday. Just look back at the last county board agenda. There's a lot of items, certainly one of them impacts county employees, focus on it, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, we had 411 people participate this year. Hasn't, not our highest, again, my goal is 500. But 411 out of like 1,100 employees is pretty darn good. Would love to see 500 next year.
Could you expand on the bullet point 2D, that career paths aren't always apparent and looking at alternatives?
I don't have that in front of me, but, so I think that probably came out of DOT. And I'm working with DOT right now. So we have, right now, our system is pretty rigid. We have an engineering tech, an engineer 1, engineer 2, engineer 3. And you're kind of stuck in that position until one of these vacates. But while they're in that position, they're getting certifications, they're getting experience, they're getting all kinds of stuff that would qualify them for a job somewhere else. So they want to see, how am I advancing or am I stuck? So I've been working with DOT. We haven't come to a final decision yet, but we're looking at like removing the 1, 2, 3 off of engineers. And again, it's a concept still. And looking at what are they coming in with, and as they develop, do they become a 2, do they become a 3? And I said, what would you do if you had 3 engineer 3s? What if they all, and they're like, oh my God, what we could do, we wouldn't have to hire this consultant that costs 3 times more than our employees. The things we could do if we had 3 3s, so.
And that's an example of DOT. Really, in most of our offices and departments, they are small enough that there can be some challenges in finding that next spot up sometimes. But I think Cheryl's done a good job of kind of challenging employees in this discussion, saying it's not just about how long you've been here. You know, what are you working on to make yourself better, and challenge employees to find those opportunities to force the managers to say, I've got to do something to keep this employee.
Right.
And we talked about moving. It's like if you're an admin 2 in this department and there is no admin 3 or admin coordinator, apply for a job when it opens in another department.
Right, and I guess I would encourage trying to look at that based on the qualifications on the person, not just the position. I'm just using the example of when I was working for DCFS, and you have child welfare associates, child welfare specialists, child welfare advanced specialists, and child welfare senior specialists, and all of those were based on qualifications and experience. And literally by the time I think when I left the Woodstock office, I think everybody was an advanced specialist, because all of us had more than 10 years experience and had a master's degree. You know, which like you said, allowed for a lot of flexibility. There was a lot of things that we were able to do internally at the office because we had the advanced specialist. There's only certain things that advanced specialists can do based on policy and procedure. You know, and then there were a lot of offices, just because of their turnover, that they only had 1 advanced specialist. But at the time, we had a lot of retention in Woodstock.
And that's kind of what I think is what we're looking at with DOT and their engineering staff right now.
It works.
Again, bring them in, and then advance them as they spent a lot of time looking at what would an engineer 1 look like, what would an engineer, and what were the qualifications and skills and certifications and years of experience and dollars of projects.
There's a minimum amount of time you could possibly move from a.
Yeah, it was like 2 years.
Yeah. You have to.
Yeah.
Some of these things these certifications just take time. You can't race to 3 if you come
So
in
we're
as a
looking at things.
Yeah, and it did provide like you said, incentives for self-development, because I mean, selfishly, that was one of the reasons why I went to graduate school,
Yeah,
was
sure.
because I saw, well, I don't have to wait. You know, as soon as I get my master's degree, I'm gonna get a bump.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'm gonna become I'm an advanced specialist. I don't have to wait for an advanced specialist position to open up.
Yeah.
You know, so it did encourage that self-development,
Mhm.
because you could see, okay, as soon as I get this, I get that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you. That brings us to the county board rules remaining suggestions. I don't know if you can pull it up on your screens, folks, but we have the summaries pages that Scott put together, came out as a separate email if you can find it.
Hey Cheryl. While they are getting this ready, could you update these guys on the animal control situation, decertification?
Ooh, yeah. So, you know, a couple years ago, we had two SEIU units decertify out at Valley High. And that was a really good reflection on the fact that Tom Anarella was really addressing their issues and listening to them. And well, we are now aware that animal control is also in the decertification process, and that should happen probably this month. Again, SEIU, same union. Again, they'd be better off if they were non-union, so that's happening.
Oh, what a
Yeah.
shame.
A little later this month.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Yeah.
I just wondered about that. She answered what my question was.
You guys want to just take them in order? The first one was a proposal by Mr. Scala that I understood he withdrew, but we're here because they all got kicked back. So, anybody have any comments on item number, on Scala proposal number 10?
You know, the
Go ahead, Mr. Kern.
there's two members per district. They're gonna sit there and look at each other and they're gonna say, do you wanna do it or do I wanna do it? If it's a tie, if each of them say they wanna do it, it's gonna be the one who's got the senior membership. Well, how do you do it any different?
You could flip a coin. That's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't, you know, you could do what we're doing on the other and say who has the most number of votes or something like that, but in the end, it's one committee and half the board's gonna be on it, and, you know, I'm just looking at his language. I think whether his language is in or out, it's still the same result. You're still gonna have one member from either, so I don't think it changes anything. But, Mr. Vijay, you had your hand.
It was just a similar question to what board member Mr. Kearns had said. Is simply, let's suppose that Mr. Kearns and I were in the same district. We would sit down and say, do you want to do it? I want to do it. However we want to do it. If we both said, no, we don't want to do it, then we still would have to figure it out. I would assume this would be done hopefully prior to the meeting. And so in doing so, that we have that, of course, what would happen is then maybe a flip of a coin might be if there would be two new members of a district.
Or two members of the same, you know.
Yeah,
the
it's
same
still gonna be
longevity,
the,
whatever it is.
So in that regard, I see no challenges unless, one of the members were not present at the meeting. And so then, what do you do? I mean, we had that circumstance in District 1, where 2 years ago, we had to wait until one of the members from District 1 was able to be called upon. So that would be the only question that I have. So I just remember that circumstance. So we had to postpone. But if they're not there, then
The one in the room's probably gonna get to decide.
Well, and that was the challenge, that, you know, we had a vote of 2-1, but then we postponed it until we were able to get, I believe it was Mr. Wilbeck was able to get onto the phone.
Okay.
So that does present a problem. So that may be something that he was direct, I don't know, I can't mind reading.
No,
But I have no problems with it as it stands.
Okay, so as it stands, Scala withdrew it, we'll just leave it be. Okay. That brings us to proposal number 11 by Scala.
I actually, Mr. Chairman, it would be proposal number 13.
13 was the next one that got sent back?
Yes.
Okay, so that's
Hold on.
the next page from Ms. Wing.
Mhm.
So then proposal 11, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. May I interrupt?
11 and 12 were already resolved at the board member. They weren't sent back to us for review.
May I make a comment on 11?
13 was sent back to review. That was what
Oh,
my
I thought 11 and 12 in my notes were sent back.
No,
There
they
was
were,
already consensus to strike.
they were
Mhm.
approved as proposed.
I stand corrected, thank you.
Okay, so that gets us to 13.
Do we, excuse me, before we go, I just want to bring this up to the public who might be seeing this. Under proposal 11, no more than one member may sit on the committee. As the chair has pointed out to me, each member of the board, with caveat or correction, will serve on 3 committees with the exception of 4 board members. They will only serve on 2. That's the way it'll work out.
That's just the mathematical
Yeah,
way it works.
so I agree with that. My only question is who's going to be the lucky ones that are only going to have to serve on, the unfortunate ones, let me rephrase that, the unfortunate ones that could only be on 2 committees. and not
Maybe a
3.
line in that group. There may be a whole line trying to be in one of those 4.
Well, and that's the challenge. How would we go about making that
It's gonna,
decision?
you're gonna do committee by committee and see who's on it, and, you know, when you get to I don't know how you're gonna make that decision. My guess is it's probably either brand new people or old people, one or the other. You know, the committee, on committees creates that organization. You know, I mean, in theory, they could take somebody and not have them be on anything. My apologies, we'll get rid of that. You know, you could have somebody that's not on anything, and so then you'd have that person be the person off all over the place. That's what.
So we're going to leave it to the
The
committee.
committee
and
and
committees
committees
make that
gets to
decision.
decide how to do that.
Because I remember they had asked what committees you want to be serving on.
Sure.
And so they make as much accommodation as possible for that.
Which I would think that we would, I can't imagine that the board wouldn't want, you know, some people are good at one thing, some people are good at another. If you happen to have some expertise in, you know, you're a transportation engineer, you know, to pick on the transportation department, I would love to have you on the transportation team. On the other hand, you know, if your career was in some other area, I don't know that, you know, if I had a transportation engineer versus somebody who just liked to drive a truck, it may not be the same thing. So I think when the committee on committee sits down, I would think that they take the preferences of board members who've already said this is what I'd like to be on, plus the career paths and the backgrounds of people, and put them together to try to get committees to function. I mean,
Thank you, I yield back.
So, it's all talk.
I would just hope, in response to that, Michael, I would hope that whoever's chairing that committee on committees and those people that's serving would take into consideration potentially some of the chairmen that have huge responsibilities on their committees. I'll just note finance. I know how much time Chairman Scala puts in on that. Maybe he only wants to serve on 2. The other one I think of is the chairman of
Transportation?
public
I said
health.
Public health.
Right, yeah, and again, so maybe understanding that there would be just a natural suggestion that some of those people only serve on 2, because their one assignment is so huge, the 2 committees would be enough. So I just throw that out to this group and have those kinds of conversations. they might be very willing to only serve on 2.
Okay. It gets us to 13. Ms. Wagner is on the bottom of page 12 if you have it.
Well, she wanted to add that in,
She wanted to add that
what's
in.
stricken out in yellow.
That what was stricken out, yeah. And it was sent back here. My overall reaction is we've been broadcasting live. I don't know how it necessarily needs to be on. I know how the 2.8 originally happened with the flash photography, because we had a gentleman that was spending his day walking up to people in the middle of the meeting and flashing and from 4 foot away.
Inappropriate.
Completely inappropriate. You know, I do think that we need to make certain that the cameras don't take over the room, and we now have cameras that are, you know, in the ceiling that everybody's on. But if in fact the day comes that we have a televised event that somebody needs to be at, I do want some input as to where the cameras are set. I don't think that they should just be able to roam the room. They shouldn't be in a position to disrupt the meeting. But as far as broadcasting, I don't see us ever going away from broadcasting. I mean, we're set up now to broadcast everything, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Didn't Kelly want to include this so that it was clear that the meetings were broadcasted? Wasn't it more a point of information? Isn't that what I remember?
I recall that she just wanted to memorialize that.
Right, because we were talking about new members and what they might not know and what they should know and what should be included in the rules. Maybe there's an opportunity to note somewhere on here what is currently done or what the standard operating process is or something like that. You know, and maybe it's included in the orientation and it's, you know, a policy documented as opposed to putting it as a rule, which I view a little bit differently. But I think her concern was more, newly elected individuals would not necessarily recognize that was a standard.
Kind of wanting to draw a line, so we're not going to go backwards in terms of.
Right, so maybe,
Well,
maybe there's a way to accommodate that information.
And my only concern on the way this one was written was, I would say when possible, you know, if we
I
had
wouldn't
a
even
tornado
include
hit
it.
through the area,
Yeah,
you know,
but-
I mean, we do it when we can. If the microphone stops working, we're not going to cancel our meeting.
But I wouldn't even put it in rules. I understood what you wanted to do, and I think that she felt that there was no other pathway or avenue or a documentation that information would be shared with the new board members as well as with the public. So maybe there's a way we could memorialize that in some other fashion as opposed to including it in the rules. At least I apologize, that's what I remember.
Yeah,
I'm
well-
old now, so maybe I didn't remember correctly.
And we can easily incorporate that as part of the new county board member orientation,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
to
yeah.
let them know the expectation is that
That'd
Our
be a
meetings
great
are
place to have.
broadcast.
Yeah, and we're talking about some of that anyway, so, I mean, that would be my recommendation, and I think that would meet her.
Sure.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Any other, is that okay with everybody? That we put it into orientation? Okay, then the next one after that was 14, correct?
correct.
All right. So my concern with this was twofold. Number one is this is exactly what happens. And number two is lack of a quorum, the meeting's over anyway. I mean, you can't have a meeting without a quorum. So you can't make any decisions and you probably should cancel the meeting and go home. As far as the other's concerned, Administrative Services has had the honor of having so little to do on their agenda that we can cancel a meeting. But I do remember times when meetings got canceled, and that was the process, is that it was always with Peter in my case, but you know, we would discuss, hey, we only have 2 things on the agenda, do we want to bring everybody in for something that is, you know, 10 minutes or, and doesn't need to be done right now. I don't know how this would change, whether it's in the board rules or not. I mean, I would still think you have the right to cancel a meeting if there's nothing on the agenda. And if I was a board member and they hauled me in for a meeting that had nothing on the agenda, I'd be pissed, honestly. Got enough to do without coming to meetings that don't need to be called. I don't like, I wouldn't want it to be just staff, and I wouldn't want it to be just the committee chair. I think having the two discussions beforehand is helpful. But, and like I say, the lack of a quorum, that's a Robert's Rules of Orders question. That's not even up to us. But,
To
yes.
clarify the lack of quorum, sometimes if we get a sense that there may not be enough members to show up before the meeting, we'll send out the communication asking so we can determine whether or not we will have a quorum. So we may know in advance there
Yeah,
will
in
be a
which
lack of
case,
quorum,
if
and I think that's what that's
we don't have a
addressing.
quorum, we don't have a quorum. I think that has changed a little bit on the fact that I think that the rules in terms of calling in have loosened pretty dramatically in light of COVID. And I know the statute still says you have to have a quorum present, but I think in an emergency, if you get 8 people on the phone, you get 8 people on the phone. There aren't that many emergency committee meetings, but in theory, I think you could have one.
But 8 people on the phone, you can't have it.
You can't technically have a meeting, but I'd still, if we had a true emergency here, I would think that we would, get a consensus and come back when we can have a meeting. And I wouldn't want somebody in an emergency to make a decision without consulting us when all they had to do is do a phone call. But
So are you proposing put it in, or?
no, I'd leave it out.
Leave it
That's
out,
what
okay.
happens. If you want to put it in at anything, I'd put it on the orientation to tell people what's going on, that this is what generally happens.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, there is, before these meetings agendas go out, I do see them, as a chair of this committee. I try to make certain that it's balanced so that we're not here all day. That's sometimes why we didn't get to some things earlier and we moved them around. And I know I talk to Scott about it usually, but sometimes Peter, depending on where we're at, to make things done or get things completed. But you're always gonna have that. That's one of the jobs of whatever chairman and committee you have, is to make certain you got an agenda and you know what's going on. If we find out that we don't have a quorum, I would certainly wanna let people know we've canceled the meeting. If we don't have an issue, I'd let people know there's nothing here. We don't have anything to do today. Take the morning off.
I just wanted to clarify that, and because I agree.
Yeah, I do think you could put it on the on the introduction to let people know how it functions, but I don't think it needs to be a rule. Anybody have any other difference on that?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
When I read this, it wasn't due to a lack of quorum, it was the insufficient number of agenda items. I agree with you that if there's only 1 or 2 agenda items, unless it's an emergency type of item, it would probably make more sense not to go for those people who are for a longer distance, even though board members would come. But the question simply arises, insufficient, if there was an issue that that would be of importance, we might bring it to the chair of the committee for discussion, and the chair would go, well, there's not enough, or for whatever reason may choose not to then have a meeting, so the chance of having that discussion would not be there. I think
Well,
that would be the only thing that I would say, and that would be, of course, the chair's prerogative.
But understand, if you only had 1 item on the agenda, it's not saying you're not gonna discuss it the month after when you have 6 items. It's just saying it doesn't make sense to bring everybody in for something that isn't it's not something that has to be done right now.
Okay, that's fine.
I mean, again, I've never seen that on administrative services. I can remember times when it's happened in transportation years ago. I mean, you look at the agenda, you realize there's nothing here that can't be done the month after. And,
Happened
why?
this year.
Huh?
It happened this year.
So, and I mean, it just depends on the committee, what's going on. There are times on every committee when you've got all morning covered, and there's times on every committee, look, we had consent agenda today. I mean, it really wasn't There wasn't anything on the consent agenda that was really an issue that, you know, we were gonna spend hours on.
But the question is whether to include it in the rules or not, isn't that the
Yeah.
question?
And I don't think it needs to be.
I don't either.
I think that's what would happen anytime you have a committee. You gotta have some way to be able to say, hey, there's nothing on the agenda, let's not have a call a meeting.
On the end of the rules where we have the commissions and liaisons and everything else, this particular item on quorums and everything is an issue on Stormwater Commission. But by state statute, we have to have Stormwater Commission. I don't know if there's a way we can combine that with something else, because the problem is we can't get a quorum because the municipalities haven't been showing up. So if we don't get at least one municipality in there, we're trying to amend the ordinance right now, and we can't get people to come.
In that instance, that's not, I know it's an issue, but isn't that a stormwater issue? We've got to get all the elected officials into a meeting so they can be amended, so staff can represent the
If
municipalities.
that's our problem, we've been having, we can't even get them there.
You got to get an omelet chef. or
So
something
now
one
we're not
morning.
gonna meet, now they can't meet until the new board. So we basically have had an entire year that got nothing
I
done.
appreciate that, but maybe we got to look for a different meeting time for that special meeting. Yeah.
Suggestion?
Yeah,
Can't you tack it on before you do shared services, where you know that they're gonna show up?
Well, I think Joe raises it. Maybe there, and when there's an
Maybe
instance
do it
where
at a
we know
McCog
we're
meeting.
going to have
Or a
those
McCog
presidents.
meeting, yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
But McCog's
It's
not
hard to
really,
get them here at 7:30 in the morning.
right, but McCog's not really, you know, but the shared services
No,
is
but
more a governmental
There'll be members
arm of.
at McCog
Yeah.
that could do
If
it,
we
and
posted
then
it
you
and
just
said
show up
that
and
the
say, we're
public
having a
meeting's
meeting
gonna
over
be
here
at
to
the
grab
Mansion,
you.
that's legal.
Well, you'd have to post, right?
Joanna.
sure.
don't
I mean,
know
you have to
if that's
post.
come.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to post it and
Yeah, we can do it.
make it all legal.
I'm there.
We
Whatever-
gotta figure
whatever
something
works.
out on that one.
Okay.
Okay.
Because we've had several times that people show up, members show up, and this is where this cancellation comes in. We've just been canceling them now because how do you do it?
Okay.
The motivations, just so I'm clear, is to enable municipalities to give their voting rights to a staff member.
Exactly.
But
That's-
to-
that's
But
what
to
we-
facilitate that, we need all of the elected officials in there to make one change in the bylaws.
Yeah, well, we've got several changes, but that's the one of
Yeah,
them,
okay.
so that we can have someone there.
All right, but
All right.
not a
Can we
county
go
board.
on, can we go on to the next, what's the next one in order? Is it 16?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the chairperson may add committee items deemed to be time sensitive. But this is this was, the issue with this is you're telling the chairman, who the board rules don't necessarily apply, the chairman of the county board, who's not necessarily bound by the board rules, how to do something. And that's why it's,
I
just-
agree with you, because we don't have control over what the chair puts out. He has that right to put it on and
Yes.
whatever.
I agree. Again, I think what's happening somewhat is that there's, it's convoluted as to what should be rules and then what information should be made available. And I think that that's one of the reasons that there was some comment about, you know, addressing an orientation. And that happens, and it's particularly relevant because we had a significant change in board members the last couple of elections. So there's not that, you know, kind of continuity where people, I already know that. So I just, again, I think that that's, at least from my perspective, that's what I'm seeing. And I think it's terribly important as we go forward that I think that's gonna be more and more the case because people are not serving as long, right? So we always have to make sure that we're educating that new group of people that are coming in so that they understand exactly what the practice is and what's considered policy already, kind of, sort of. So that would only be my,
Again, if
and I
you
get
wanted-
it, I mean, I
If you
get,
wanted to add that, I'm fine with that. I just don't think that you can put it in here.
I don't think it should be a rule either.
Right.
That's
Should
what
be.
I'm
We'll
saying.
make a note, that's something that
Yeah.
we touch on board rules.
The board
Yeah,
has
yeah,
the
yeah.
right always to
Yeah.
kick it back to committee if they don't like what the chairman puts on.
Right.
It's easy.
Or table it permanently.
But those are, I mean, seriously, I'm gonna beat you up again. Seriously, that's what should, those common practices, how this operates, how does a committee operate, how do you get something on the agenda, how do you, all of those are the kinds of things that I think are extraordinarily important that we pay some close attention to next orientation with new people. And I'd even invite some of the old people back.
Yeah, you're getting on to our next agenda.
Let's finish this one before we go to that one.
Ms. Alcock, are you inferring that the experienced individuals, not old?
Yes, thank you.
Very much, I appreciate it.
I happily stand corrected.
That gets us to 17. Same kind of thing. I think that is exactly what Pam just talked about. You need to know how to do that, but it doesn't need to be a board member. I
Right.
mean, if you've got something that you think should be a special recognition, tell the chairman to put it on the agenda. It doesn't need to go through committee for special recognition. We don't, I mean, but I do think it's important for somebody to know it and how to do it. If you're a brand new board member, how do you get this on? I would think if you've gone through all the political necessities and speaking and other things you had to do to get here, that you're probably not afraid to ask somebody, how do I do this? But it would be a good thing to know. Anybody have a different feel on that? I mean, is there a time when anybody's ever brought something that you know of, Peter, that didn't get on for special recognition that somebody wanted? I mean, I know when I was chairman those 2 years, I stopped them from
He's
bringing a horse up
smiling.
there. But other than that was about it.
Yeah, I mean, not every proclamation makes it, but most do.
No, I just remember when they wanted to bring horses in. I'm like, parking lot's fine, elevator's not.
Yeah. But everything gets good consideration.
Horses.
Well, they were just gonna be the little ones, but it was like.
They
like,
still,
no,
they
having
still make a
board
big
meeting,
mess.
We don't need them here, you know. Anyway. Is 19 the next one?
Yes, sir.
You
It's a
can't do,
toss-up to me.
you can't do this.
It says the same thing
Yeah, but,
without it.
yeah, right. Plus, it's not,
It's
there's
telling
no,
other people in the room what they can do and they're not.
right, and I'm just saying, you know, you're supposed to respect the confidentiality, but there's no penalty, there's no law broken, there's no, right, so, I mean, I've argued this forever and ever. You, by virtue of the responsibility of being the elected official, you need to respect that confidentiality, but you can't force people to do it.
Yeah, the only thing that we do unusual, I think, since with COVID, we had so many people on the phone lines.
Well, that's,
that
yeah,
we cut that off, but that wasn't because.
because you don't
we
know who
were-
else is in the room.
Well, and you also don't have any way of keeping it
Yes,
private.
right,
You know, because the broadcasting ended up being broadcasting.
correct.
But other than that, and even that, I think it was just done as a matter of necessity, not because we were trying to prevent somebody from the board being involved. So, any other, we've now, I think that considers all of them unless somebody's got something else they want to talk about on confidentiality. Are there any other changes or corrections that were proposed or sent back to us we didn't consider? Nope. Okay. All right. does anybody have any requests for any of these to go to the full board? Seeing none, yes?
I would just ask that when you make your report on committee, that you note that we did discuss them, and this was the consensus.
That
And
we're
a lot
saying
of the
that-
items are gonna go and be included in the orientation process.
That's
Just so everybody, yeah, I would
don't
just,
want
so it's
people to
clear.
think we ignored it, but I do think that's worth the long.
No, yeah.
Okay.
And the requested modifications are just gonna flow to December for the vote, is
No, we're not gonna have we won't have a vote on them.
Okay.
There won't be changes in
that?
it.
Right. there is
But
no-
we will send the information necessary for these to make certain they become part of an orientation package.
Yeah.
So essentially, the rules as we voted on in.
Are the rules.
Are the rules now, they're done. They're
Okay.
closed until the next term.
Yeah, so 3 months from now, the next group can bring it back up.
I don't want to go there.
Mhm.
Excuse me.
That takes care of that capital plan update?
Yeah.
Morning. You're getting here before 9:30 in the morning. You didn't get a nap in the back.
So we'll walk around the campus with me over to Building A. The roof membrane has been completed. The windows are scheduled to begin next week. The contractor's saying 3 weeks for installation. If I use the algorithm that the contractor's given me in the past, it's probably gonna be closer to 4 weeks or maybe 4.5 weeks. And that depends on the weather. But it looks like we'll get them in before the weather really turns to become cold for us. The west elevation of the government center, the windows are all in. The brickwork through wall flashings is complete. Sealants are being completed today and tomorrow. And we will demobilize probably next week from that site. We'll do a punch list. And we'll drive out to Heartland, the irrigation, the effluent ponds, liners are in place. Are not installed, but are available for use. Looks like the 3rd week of October will be the start date. The ponds have been lowered to a level that the contractor responsible for getting the sludge out can work with it. They then take it and inject it into adjacent farm land and use as a permitted use to dispose of that. The pond liners then will be installed, and that'll probably take in the order of 3 weeks to do, maybe a little bit longer. But again, we should have that work done before the weather becomes an issue. At Valley High, the therapy room's been complete. IDPH has signed off on it. We don't have any issues there. We're working through the last 2 shower renovation projects. The tile setter's working on them now, and that's really the end of the work that's needed. The tile setters will get complete. Again, doing the math, they're at about 20% today. That puts them out into the first week of November, unless they staff it up, which we've asked for. After that, it's a matter of putting grab bars on and just shower trims, et cetera. So that work is moving along and looks like we'll be complete in November. The memory care wing work has begun on the schematic design. We've had a kickoff meeting, talked about some of taking the original concept plan and looking at that as a starting point. Where do we go from there? What other ideas can be incorporated into that? That's the schematic phase. That's a series of 4 meetings. Then it goes to design development, where the engineers, et cetera, look at it and put the actual facilities into the project. Then it becomes bid docs. We should see that in January, February. So that work's progressing well. We have received requests back for proposals from construction management firms. We're in process of evaluating that and making a decision to move on that. And that pretty well, without starting to talk about next year's project, that takes us up to date. Is there any questions? Great. Thanks for your time.
Have a good day.
You too.
Communications.
All right, excellent.
And we got a report yesterday on it, if you looked at your email.
All right, well, I know I can't keep up with Tom and the riveting information that goes along with facilities, but I'm gonna do my best here.
Where are you putting your sludge?
And sludge, yeah. All right, so yesterday afternoon, I did send y'all a copy of the communications report, and I just put it in a little easier to use, easier to scroll format here so you can all see a bit better. There we go. All right, awesome. So, communications for this month. So, we were very happy to have our new YouTube channel up and running, which is right now streaming you live onto YouTube. Makes me very happy. And we're promoting it on our various social media channels. We also highlighted 2 different employee groups, one through the Regional Office of Education and our purchasing department. And I am proud to say that McHenry County Administration has now had its largest Facebook post ever. Which one, you might say? This one right here.
Yes. Always the animals, right?
26,955 people reached.
Dogs, deers,
Hey,
puppies,
Bambi's cute. He
Everybody
just
shares.
gets-
bison.
Look at the shares, look at the amount of shares.
My
I
God,
know.
that's great.
It got picked up by Star 105, so yeah, you gotta love it.
Very cool.
We also launched the communications survey. Right now we have a total of 194 respondents as of Monday. I would like that number to be a bit higher. So we're extending it a bit longer there for another 2 weeks. I'm proud to say that we had a lot of link clicks off of our Resume McHenry County newsletter and on the various administration social media posts that we've had. So we are pushing hard to get it out. Also, if you've used the facilities within this building, I'm sure you've noticed that we are leveraging all methods possible to get the word out. We are also trying to make sure that we hit a younger demographic. I don't really want to go into what has been said in the survey quite yet because I don't want to skew anything because it's still open. But we have noticed that of the 194 people that have responded, 25% are under the age of 44, and we want to make sure that we get as broad of a spectrum of the community as possible. So that being said, we're trying to, make sure that we extend our efforts in different ways.
So let me suggest to you that as part of our communications, you reach out to some of our high school civic classes, send them the survey and make them part of a class assignment.
I love that idea. We're going to do that.
And that way you get a couple of pops. You get the pops with the kids, the surveys, but you also then again get teachers much more engaged in what's going on at the county level too. So even if they invite you in to talk about what you're doing with communications, and then you do however it works into their plan, but I would suggest you reach out to our local high schools.
Perfect. Will do.
I just happen to have a kid that teaches civics.
All right.
Maybe
I'd
we can
also
share
like to
an
note
email
that
address.
we were proud to assist with 3 different press releases for other departments. In the past month, we developed 2 different videos for another department, and we are continuing to support planning and development to get out the word about the comprehensive plan survey. So had a lot of link clicks on that one too, so I'd like to think that we're responsible for getting the word out. For the next time round, we really want to increase those communication survey responses, so I'm sure that every single person in this room has taken it themselves, and I am sure that you've all roped in your, significant others, guiltable children, all that kind of thing to take the survey. So, please. We would also like to get going on a About Us page on the county website and really encourage volunteer opportunities as well. And of course, we're always trying to increase the reach and engagement of our social media platforms. As you can see, we had a large spike right here, thanks to Bambi. But we also want to get more engagement because it doesn't seem like we're doing as hot this month as I would like. But that's okay. We're going to keep on pushing it.
Are we reaching out to other media? You ever think about picking up and calling 105.5 and asking them to do a little bit of an interview with what we're doing at the county level on communications and having a little one-on-one with Joe and Tina or something? I mean, we've done that before, and I mean, they'll do it for nothing, right? I mean, 5 seconds.
I'll make an effort to see
Yeah,
if they'll.
if you need, yell at me.
You
We
betcha.
can do that, but it's just a little, go
Phone
on
call.
now, right now, and fill out the survey. Let's do it. Blah blah. I mean,
Yep.
they'll pop it and then they'll repeat all day long. And I don't know if you know, but 105.5 has more women listening to it than any other radio station in the county.
Really?
Yeah,
Didn't know
really.
this. Well, I mean, and to that point, we are, our press releases are being picked up, and not just the administration ones. These are all the different news stories that are based on press releases that went out.
I'm 2 feet away.
Yeah, I know, me neither, but that's fine.
I'm sorry, guys. I swear, I did send it to you all too, and but, yeah, I think it more gets the point across that there's
A
quite,
lot of them.
there's quite a bit of stories that do come through the press releases, but I really like that idea, and see if we can get.
It's just different. You can't. It's just different.
And that's what I've got, unless there's any other questions for you.
Mr. Beecham?
Thank you. In our last board meeting, I had brought up my interest on the various links that were included, Truth Social, Rumble, Getter, Nextdoor, TikTok, and Twitch. My concern is that under Truth Social, Rumble, for instance, Rumble, controversial political figures, when their videos are taken down, we're asking whether people would be concerned. Getter tends to target Americans conservatives. There tends to be under Truth Social, in my opinion, a conservative group. Under Twitch, it's directed with progressive professional politicians, and many of them are ultra-right or QAnon conspiracy theorists. I'd like to know what was the criteria of choosing these links, social networks versus other social networks?
Yes, sir. Well, we developed a question in our communications group, which is all the different communications professionals throughout the county organization. So we were trying to find different ways to reach out to people because we already use various platforms on social media such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We use various apps, YouTube, we use e-newsletters, and we were just broadening the net and trying to figure out different well-known platforms to try to reach out to people in different ways and meet them where they're at.
I see, okay. And so then the communication group determined that those different groups?
Yes.
Okay. Was there discussion on other types of platforms that would not be highly conservative or conservative? I mean, I'm looking at, you have 6 of which right now, at least 4 are the conservative to ultra-conservative. And I'm just wondering why.
Going the wrong way.
Based on.
I'm sorry, I thought I had the floor.
You do. But
I'm asking Alicia.
I'm sorry?
So we I had some of the same questions, Mike, but this was a sample, this is a survey. We have not made the decision to use any of these platforms, but I think the group, we came up with some of the ones that were more common.
Okay.
Regardless of political bent.
Well,
Okay.
and I look at that, and maybe there's, and I'm not saying there's any scheme, but I'm just wondering, when you take a survey and you ask people about which ones you want to go to, you're already kind of making a decision. If people sat there and said, for the sake of debate, we all love TikTok and we want to do TikTok. All right, but you've already given them that opportunity to make that decision. You haven't given them an opportunity to look at others. So my concern is what I observe on these platforms, they tend to be, a vast majority of them tends to be on the conservative or ultra-conservative or conspiracy. And while the group may have come with a neutral opinion on it, it doesn't seem to be a balance. And I'm just concerned about that. I make a comment on that and I'll yield back to the chair.
Elaborate, because I'm serious. I'm sitting here looking at you completely astounded. What other social media avenues would you have more of a liberal bent? Because I didn't realize that you had a conservative bent. What would you recommend?
I'm not a communication specialist. All I know is I look at the survey, and when I look at the survey, I then started with a suggestion from an individual. I looked, the first one was the Truth Social, and they were concerned about that. And I'm like, okay, so let me expand on this. I'm not a communication expert, and that's fine, but to look at least 4 out of the 6 are conservative bent. I'm sitting there going, is there any other platform that would be neutral? I mean, if you
have
want
a
to look at this, we
suggestion
could
for
say
one?
That's what I'm
MSNBC is more liberal. The Fox Network, depending on how you look at it, would be more conservative. So some people sit there and say, all right, is Channel 9 a middle of the road? Is a CNN a middle of the road? I am not a communication specialist, but all I know is when you ask people which ones would you be interested in, and they get a choice, and the choices are more conservative oriented or Curion oriented, I begin to ask the question. I'm not criticizing their decision making.
Understand that. I'm just asking what that other
I don't have
other
that.
option.
I don't have
Do you
that.
have an other on there? I mean, those listed,
Yes,
you have
we
an
do,
other?
and
Okay.
that's what I wanted to say, that, we do have other, and at the very end, we ask, do you have any comments for us? And we would like, for people to put their own feedback in, whatever it is, just so that we know what the public's thinking, that's all we're after.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to figure it out. That's what I'm trying to find out.
So
If
I
there's
would ask that whomever that individual is, maybe more of an IT person, if there are other avenues or pathways or social media entities, share them. I don't know either. I'm not, I'm trying to stay away from that. But I'm serious, if there are other ones, share them and bring them forward.
Yeah, must take over this.
Because I don't think that, did you look at this as one way or another way? More conservative, more liberal, more middle of the road, whatever.
Honestly, we're just trying to provide options.
So yeah, so Michael, I would just, if there are other options, throw them out. Give them to them.
Tell us if there. Yeah. Carlos?
I guess my only concern going forward, and I'll be the first to say I don't know much about these platforms other than I know that from what I've read, they have, shall we say, a less rigorous screening tool in terms of providing accurate information or misinformation. And Facebook and Twitter and all of the others have had their criticisms about what they keep up and what they pull down. But again, from what I've seen in the media, they are doing a better job than these. And I guess I would want the county, before any decision is made, to go on any platform, be it conservative or liberal, I don't care. What are their screening guidelines? Because I don't want the county to then be associated with a platform that has a reputation for misinformation. That then is gonna taint anything we put on there.
Valid concern, so.
And from my
Jill.
perspective, I look at social media like a chainsaw. I really do. You can use it to trim your hedges, or you can use it to perform the chainsaw massacre. And I don't mean this to make light of the situation, but I'm just saying that social media, it really depends on who, is speaking. And you can just as easily put misinformation on various platforms, and that's the way we looked at it.
So again, my experience has been some platforms have a more rigorous screening policy or procedure and others don't. And to be honest, some people are drawn to those that don't have a screening policy, so because they know I can put up whatever I want and it's gonna stay there. Versus if I put it over here, it's gonna get taken down. And that's where I'm saying being a little bit more particular.
As long as you're looking at things on a side note, because we're kind of off track here. The reason that in 1996 they passed a statute in Washington DC that said your platform is protected from libel and slander claims because you didn't put it up. That is currently being challenged in the courts as to whether or not that should be the case. If that challenge wins, all of the platforms are going to change. And candidly, it's about time. They ought to be like newspapers because they're treated by the public like newspapers, but they don't take any responsibility for what they do.
They don't have that internal control. Now again, some
So-
platforms have taken it on themselves to create those internal controls.
Well, in '96, when they started this, we were wondering whether or not platforms were gonna be successful. They're making plenty of money, they can police themselves. So, but at any rate,
That's all I'm saying.
any other questions or comments about this? Thank you. I appreciate the effort, I really do. I know that you're doing
I have a comment.
go ahead.
I think you're doing a wonderful job at the ones you're using and selecting them. And we are from different avenues, sides here, partisan, whatever you want to say. And I think we got to take that garbage out of this. You just keep doing what you're doing, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Scott?
Just one comment, the intent is just to understand what our population is using, and it's really not to say that the county's going to use any one platform over another. It's just really to understand what is
Where
out there.
people are getting-
Yeah.
where people are-
And once we understand that, then we can determine what our communication strategy will be moving forward.
But again, valid concern and valid comment that's raised, just to be aware.
I thought it
See,
was
the
very,
hang up on this would also get out of
Love that illustration,
Nice.
I gotta tell you, well done.
Yeah.
Any other?
I'm good, I'm done.
Thank you. Administrators report.
All
Is
right.
that when we're gonna talk about county board orientation?
Yeah, we can talk about county board orientation a little bit. We put, see if you're gonna be part of this. Put this on your desk this morning. This is just a kind of a start of ideas that Alicia, Scott, and I have been collecting, and Kathy. But kind of hearing loud and clear that, we probably want to keep about the same size orientation, probably 2 mornings, again, maybe straddling swearing in, so we can deal with some things before swearing in, but then after swearing in, we can do the IT technology and get some of that stuff taken care of, the assignment of the computers. But really want to focus one of those days on process. And I think that's what's been coming in loud and clear, and looking forward to inviting maybe some existing county board members and maybe some outgoing county board members who've been around for a while. And maybe Mr. Young wants to spend a morning with us and talk about process,
All in favor?
Or some of the chairmen,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
Lori Parrish has got a unique perspective on, being new and then taking on that leadership position, so.
So Scott, Lisa, and I kind of scribbled some of these notes yesterday, sort of what we're thinking is that we probably do want to spend some time on budget and Robert's rules and that stuff, but maybe less on transportation and the courts and the sheriff than we've done in the past. Just maybe do kind of a quick flyover on that stuff.
Can I suggest, though, that you incorporate an opportunity to bring those individuals into a room and introduce them, and maybe ask them to be aware that they'll be called by, or even set a day, just a brief orientation of 45 minutes and invite the new people in.
Right.
But I think that new members need to see who those people are and have a name, because that's one of the comments that Carolyn made coming in. She didn't know who anybody was. They'd walk in the room and
So
she said, I don't know who that is.
You give me an opportunity to segue to another item I wanted to touch on, and something that Scott and I have talked with Chairman Bueller about, and that's kind of an update on the strategic plan meeting, get to know all the elected officials and department heads meeting, and looking at January the 12th as a committee of the whole. It'll obviously be a light committee of the whole, because we will have hardly had any committee meetings in December.
That's a great idea.
But then, kind of walking through the plan that you guys created and what we've accomplished, where we're having some roadblocks, what we need to do yet, but then letting that new county board offer some of their own ideas about tweaks to that thing. But then maybe spending, and then we're still spitballing on this a little bit, but this is some of what we heard at our last elected official and department head meeting, is they want to interact with these new board members. So, if we have 18 board members and 24 department heads in a room, we could split them up at 6 or 8 tables, spend a half hour, just and Scott and I and Elise
And rotate.
can moderate some of this, but Give us three
That's a
things
great
that you
idea.
wanna work on, just give us 3 things that you wanna work on, so that kind of discussion, report out, but, you know, we're getting a little bit more face time than with our elected officials and our board members. Maybe, and then have Panera in here or something like that, and hold everybody around for an hour, but that's what we're kinda thinking around.
I think that's great. I mean, I really do. That's so much more personable. I mean, now I see you, we talk, I can feel more comfortable about picking up the phone and calling you and asking for info. I think that's a great
Yeah, but
idea. And
it'd
you're
probably
saying,
be pretty
really.
easy to keep the discussion going, but again, if the 3 of us and a handful of others, you know, Kevin, we kind of seated to keep the discussion on topic and moving along. So that's what we're thinking.
And I would also ask, after the election, to ask some of the newer individuals for ideas of where they thought there was a void or a deficit. I mean, I think Carolyn's got an unbelievable perspective, kind of coming in the middle, and then potentially some of the other newly elected people and where they saw that there was a void, and
Okay.
I didn't know that.
So Scott's good suggestion on here at the last bullet is, I think we'll send out this in a request to board members this week, just saying, hey, what else are we missing?
Yeah,
And get
that would
some more
be
ideas.
great.
And so we need to put this together.
Yep. When we look at the orientation, you know, and having done a few through my tenure, it's a fire hose of information. And as those who've sat through it, a lot of information to take on in 2 days. We want to look at identifying what is the essential information that you need to know within the first 3 to 6 months. You're gonna, as a county board member, you're gonna learn a lot as you go along. You're gonna learn how, say, the court systems operate. You don't need to know that from day one, per se. So what we like to do is understand from you, when you first took that seat, what did you need to know? And looking back, what did you wish you knew within that first 3 to 6 months? And that's what we want to ask. And you can start thinking about that now, because you'll get that email, and that's going to help us really develop this orientation. So it's tailored to information that you as a county board member need. I mean, we can fill you with all sorts of information, and we can spend 5 days talking about it, but the intent is just get that essential.
Right, and I would be very cognizant of the fact as you go and you're introducing people to various offices, which ones are constitutional officers and are elected, and what authority the board has and how that works as well. I think that there's, again, a lack of understanding in how all of that works. If you take people around and say, you know, this department versus this constitutional office, right? I mean, and it's a nuance.
It's a basic flow chart, you know, too, which could be done, and I
Thank
think
you.
that would have been helpful to me, you know, too, coming in.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, even looking at this sheet, the third bullet point really addresses that. And, you know, discussion on the role of the county board, how the work of the county board gets done, focusing on policy matters, and the role of the county board as it relates to the elected offices. I mean, that, a very high level, we can talk about that, we can prepare new county board members coming in with that understanding. And then the nuance will develop. I mean, that's going to develop through relationships and over time, but just that high level understanding that we work with the sheriff, we collaborate with the sheriff, but, you know, there is a separation in what the sheriff's office does versus the county board's office. There's some overlap.
We all learned that pretty quick. Who you can say no to and who you have to listen to.
So let's teach that before somebody
Because
tries to say.
they'll call you up and
tries
let you
to say
know.
something and gets a big no, you can't do that. Don't like those kinds of things.
Well, I would say along that same line, I think it's really important for new board members just to understand basically, you've got some idea you want to get done.
Yeah.
I mean, I know about polling boards because of the role that I played in private sector. I still think I probably hold the record for polling this board more than anybody alive, because I polled the board every single time I had a zoning petition before this, and John used to yell at me for it before I was on the board. You know, like, oh, Joe's got something on the agenda, he's calling me again. But it is important to understand that, you know, if you want to make a change in something here, you need to talk to board members, like, you know, right away. I mean, you know, if you've got, you know, maybe it can get on the agenda, maybe it can't, but you gotta get that feel out. You need to work with the other 18 or the other 17, it'll be that at that point, and talk to them. And if you are unable to do that, you are gonna be very frustrated in the next 2 to 4 years, depending on what you do, because you're not gonna get anything done. I mean, there's only so much time any of us have for somebody grandstanding. But, and I don't, and that's where I think Pam's part's important. I don't think you as staff can do that. But I think, you know, a Pam
That's kind
or
of a political
Joe or
thing,
Mike
I
or
think,
somebody
yeah.
could say,
I mean, just.
look, you know, if you come in and got a showboat, you're gonna be the lonely guy off on the end, nobody's gonna talk to you. You just have to be able to reach out to other board members and say, you know, I know your committee's, you know, transportation, pick on Jim. So I got this new gadget or this new idea, this new thing to work. How do I get it in front of you? And if you're not willing to make that phone call as a board member, and you may not know that at the beginning. I mean, but those are the things, when I look at that process, I'd like to be able to tell somebody, you know, look, the board, I don't think I've ever had a board member, you know, say, I won't talk to you about something. I don't think that's ever happened to me. You know, if somebody, you know, doesn't want to talk, that's fine, maybe it's not the right time or something, but you know, the board is usually willing to listen, and the members I've always dealt with are usually willing to listen and talk to each other. I mean, they're gonna work together. And maybe this time I don't agree with Mr. Vijay, but next time I might. And, you know, it's about the idea, it's not about the personality of the person. It has to be about the ideas. So, anyway, I do think that part is where you're gonna need board members. I would not wanna put you or Peter or anybody as a staff saying, here's how you get it done. No, you can't. You need somebody that sits on this side of the desk. So, Carlos?
I'll make a suggestion. I don't know how to operationalize it, and I don't necessarily want to give you guys more work. But I'll be quite honest, I don't remember much of organization from 4 years ago, so my suggestions are probably going to be pretty slim. In general, I thought it went well, but again, that was 4 years ago. I was going to throw out, you know, just if you could kind of plan to follow up with new board members, like after they've been in it 6 months. You know, and that could be an in-person conversation, a phone conversation, an email. Okay, now you've been in the role for 6 months. Where did we help? Where didn't we? What should we have done? Because now they're in it, you know, they've got the basic information, but hopefully the training wheels have come off, you know, to plan for a 6-month follow-up and kind of self-assess how you did.
Thank you.
While it's still fresh. Because, like I said, I don't remember much of orientation 4 years ago.
You know, one thing that I ran into that, and you helped me through it with a PED when I was on that committee, is that sometimes there are these, all these abbreviations, you know, too, for, you know, different organizations. It would, I
Acronym.
spent hours and hours just looking up these terms. And I did figure out A1, A2, B1, B2, and you know, and so on and so forth. And that's because you gave me a sheet, and don't think I didn't use that, you know, too. But I think that would be very, 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 very helpful to, you know. And I think you are doing a manual, if I'm correct. You know, some sort of a manual that people can refer to, but just adding some of those things commonly.
When you get to zoning, add the standards. So that people don't get off, put the standards for the zoning, when you're making a zoning decision, there's specific standards. I know the state's attorney's office often does it, but that can be the difference between us getting sued or not.
Yeah, we're not gonna lose track of the importance of the discussion on land use really early.
No, but that's a great suggestion to have at least a handout of those key abbreviations through the zoning. There was actually a book, I don't, somewhere in.
I have it on my wall in my cube with a little tack in it.
All the abbreviations that, and this was compiled probably early 2010, 2011, of all the abbreviations that the county uses. EMA, when Dave Christensen gives you a report, I mean, it's laden with abbreviations and abbreviations. So to that point though, I understand that that's difficult. Now the brokers are probably a little too much, but when it comes to zoning, I think that is something that has to be a key factor of the orientation, because as Chair Godmauer mentioned, they're gonna be faced with zoning decisions right off the bat, and, you know, a wrong step there could result in.
Well, like I say, I always remember Mary Luzier, this was when I was in private practice. Mary Luzier was on the board, and the petition came up, it was my client's petition, she goes, "Oh, I like that farmer, I've known him for years, we should approve his, whatever he asked for."
You know, simple things like stormwater, you know, too, a lot of people don't know, you know, we're dependent upon aquifers, you know, too, how we get our water. We're not getting it from Lake Michigan, you know, too, which is a common, you know, problem people have. Joe Heeman, you know, well water person, he, when I was running, he gave me this great big green book, and I am not exaggerating this, you know, to all you need to know about stormwater and aquifers, and I thought, I can't get through this thing in a weekend, you know, too, but I did learn a little bit from him. It's helpful.
So, any other thoughts?
No, I
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
In the last board presentation that we had, it was so clear and to the point. And I remember getting an email by board member Nowak about the compliments that was presented on the finance, on the budget. And what happens here is that, and I relate it also to what you have said, it is the matter of what is the information that we need. And we can have a presentation, and I think that the quality of the presentations are getting better and better. I think the staff is getting trained at making a shorter presentation with the follow-up information that we have. And that is, I think, part of what Carlos talked about also, is that if we can get the information, ask the question, as Ms. Althoff said, follow up with a face and a name and a phone number, that would be so much more advantageous. My thought, and this is a process, would be as you develop the orientation, get a board member to sit down and role play with you. And you don't have to go and bring all the different departments in and all that, but you can sit there and say, all right, we're going to talk about this, and just give a quick summary, and then the board member might be able to sit down and say, will you be talking about X or Y or Z on zoning? Are you going to be talking about liaison positions, which I thought was quite interesting when you get on the board. All of a sudden, the liaison positions are decided by the county board chairperson, and that individual may add on even more challenges that you have. And so in doing so, what happens here is you can go through it, and then the board member, whoever you choose, or two, might sit there and say, I think I've heard enough of this. Can we go on to Robert's Rules of Order? Or do we know what the board chairman's prerogatives are? That might be something that would refine that orientation, because let's face facts, it's the orientation that either gets somebody excited about, as Chairman Gottemeyer said, the idea of a particular issue, or is it something, if the orientation doesn't go well, people sit down and already have their own image on that. It's a process statement. Thank you, Mr. Gottemeyer.
Any other? So we'll send out an email to board members asking for their ideas. Quick little pivot here.
Yeah, why is that on the screen?
Why is this on here? You didn't see this one coming.
You
were
are
here.
here.
You know, Ware Road,
Here.
Raffle, Banford, here. We own this, that's 2 acres. That's the old animal control building, vacated in 2008. If Scott could zoom out just a tiny bit, this is 9 acres around it. It's been owned for a decade by a very prominent Woodstock real estate broker. And he and I have been in touch every 6 months for the last 10 years, always, and I always knew he was trying to sell this piece. And I always figured whoever wanted this 9 acres was gonna want our 2. So we've kind of been on a passive market, right? Just kind of, I knew this guy was selling his property, and probably whoever bought this was gonna want this. He sold this. I talked to them last week. He sold this, he didn't tell me, they didn't have to, but somebody wanted his 9 acres. Which begs the question now, should we get a little bit more aggressive in unloading that? You know, it's a nice piece of property, it's across the street from water and sewer. Someday it's gonna be residential, but I don't know, I don't know the value of us just hanging on to it at this point. And if
Can we get
you're
$1 million
comfortable
to
trying.
replace our tax
What's that?
increase? Can we get $1 million to replace our tax increase?
2.3.
Find a buyer for that, sure.
No, I
How
don't think
much did you
that's.
sell the 9 for?
It's,
we can
How
look
big
that
is
up.
it?
2 acres.
2 acres.
2 acres.
So
And,
it comes this piece, and this piece.
yeah, we own all 3. And, you know, we could,
I'd say call a realtor and find out what you think you can get for it.
I want to be careful in how we do that.
Well, you know, we could check and see what the guy just paid for it.
Yeah,
Because all you gotta do is look up at the deed downstairs.
to find out what this.
Paid
what
for
that
it, yeah.
piece paid for.
Yeah.
That's gonna
And
get you.
and
in the
that, the
ballpark.
first sale is, yeah, the first call is to the guy, do you want the other 2? And,
Well, of course.
yeah. But beyond that,
And then the
then
whole
maybe
world
work with
knows.
Adam to see if we can solicit broker services or something like that. And somebody can actually put out a sign there and say it's for sale.
Peter, could you tell me, are those 9 acres, have they been purchased by a commercial entity
No.
or residential?
It was just explained to me, kind of a guy out of the city who wants to just have a gentleman kind of farm setting, and he's probably just holding it as an asset, but right now, he's got kind of like 2 acres that he kind of plays on, the rest is just woods.
Lots of sources.
We have no buildings on that, do we?
No,
No.
and that's where the old animal control was, right?
Right, and we stripped them down, okay.
We had an offer years and years and years ago, before, but literally 2007, before the real estate collapsed, and there was a sense that the county can never have too much land, and there was a mix on the board. John, you're probably the only one who can remember some of that discussion. But I suspect it's not worth today what we could have gotten then, but that's okay. But
It'll be worth more tomorrow if we hold on to it too, you never know.
Yeah, what I'm most concerned about is getting a use that the city of Woodstock wants, frankly.
Banford.
What are those parcels zoned?
It's
Well,
where I go
it's
back to my
ag now,
office.
it's-
I asked
yeah,
them.
it's nothing.
We flew out there too.
Yeah.
The road on the left going north and
Plan
south
to-
there. It's the road to around 120 on the back way.
There's
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of cops in
Before
Bangford,
you
you
hit
don't want to
120,
bust.
if you take a left, that's Banford.
So anyway,
Marion
I
Central's to the south. Go back a little bit. Jim's trying to figure out where this is at.
I'm trying to figure out that location.
Okay, so here's
That's where we're
administration
at.
building.
You
So if you
go
take Ware Road onto
Raffle.
Raffle,
Banford's
onto
right there.
Bamford.
It's on Banford, isn't it? The
Yeah,
name
it's
of the
Banford,
street?
right, yeah.
And if you, like you see, you turn left and you see
47.
where the,
Here's Charles Miller. Here's your roundabout, the high school. So,
if you went
So
straight
southeast
to
of here.
120, Marion Central High School would be on your right-hand side.
But that's all residential, right?
It's
Yeah.
residential's all around.
Yeah.
There is a landscaper in there somewhere.
I think right on the corner.
Looks like it's
yeah, this is,
grown up in the scrub trees.
yeah, this I think is what you're referring to.
I think that's the landscape, Brittany. And then you got the 9 acres I talked about, and then
And then, yeah.
And then the 2.
Jim, just buy it, put your house there, and move out of your district.
So, if you'd like, we can,
Next week.
we can explore some options of trying to find a buyer.
It's surplus property, I'd say find some way to.
Somebody to buy it.
we don't-
Particularly now, I
We
think
don't
the
like going to
messaging would be really good, is that we're doing everything we possibly can to yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Major?
I would think that in probably less than 60 days, we may have a change in the board. They may have a different strategic plan for property. They may want to keep that open space, donate it to.
Yeah, look what it looked
I
like
don't
in
know, I would
2005.
rather, you know, we could start the process of just finding information. but
Oh, that's what the
the new
village-
board would probably.
That's fair. It's gonna take some time.
Yeah, okay.
And you will talk to the city too, right?
I've talked to the city beforehand.
And their desire for something there, do they have,
Well, they think it's gonna be residential.
okay.
You know, it was a year or so ago, we were contacted by Habitat for Humanity. And it
yeah.
was by the owner of this parcel who had been contacted by them, and they thought maybe they could
Do a whole-
replicate some of
right.
what we've seen on McHenry Avenue in Crystal Lake could be there, and the city was really enthusiastic about that.
Okay. Go back to that 2005 picture again, of the basement.
That's cool.
So that's
Lucky
what used to
lefty.
be in that corner.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, can I make a plug for our GIS department? This is publicly available.
I know
I'm on
it
the
is. I
Yeah.
look at it all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
I do
so-
too.
And-
probably the one
and
place I
actually,
visit
go back
more
to
than
the
anything.
interactive map page. Go
Yep,
back
so
where you're at
county
page.
government, GIS.
No, there's something neater. Go back.
Oh,
Go back to historical maps. Can you find that?
Where is GIS?
The
Go back to
GIS website?
GIS.
Yeah,
Alright.
click
Go
history.
down to maps.
Interactive maps?
And if you go down there, you'll see historical maps in the bottom, one of those.
Yep.
You can go back to an aerial photograph of the county from 1939.
Oh, my goodness.
That's very cool.
Oh,
I mean,
my
it's not the best. No, no, you're looking at,
Historical
go
area. There you
to,
go.
Oh, my gosh, just,
there's a lot more farmland.
wow.
But anyhow, if you ever wanna see what something looked like.
If you ever can't sleep at night.
Well, I've actually gone back and used those in courtrooms when people are arguing about what was happening on a piece of property. And, you know, to have
It's
an aerial photograph of it from 39. I mean, think what the planes were that took that photograph, guys. So anyway,
All right, we'll do some more explorations, but moving towards unloading. You might have saw Mike Wanacke was up here earlier. He was just up here to support your adoption of the Green Light resolution, so we'll look forward to Alicia's kind of doing the point on that, and we're gonna get some stuff going in November on that. You know, we've had, and I might mention this to the full board at our next committee of the whole meeting, because we've had a lot of discussions about electric vehicles and moving portions of our fleet to electric vehicles, and, you know, just one of the big hangups all has been, how do we access public funds to build our infrastructure for, you know, charging stations and to facilitate all this? Well, Shailen had a meeting of our village managers earlier this week, and we had ComEd representatives there, and it was quite informative. And in terms of a timeline, it's pretty clear we aren't going to get any real solid information until March. ComEd has a plan now in front of the ICC for the release of these public dollars, and to do things like assist residents, assist businesses, assist governments in doing these infrastructure investments. But just like we've seen with fiber, the federal money gets announced, everyone gets excited, but it takes 18 months for rules and such to be created, and that's, I guess, understandable in a sense, but we're going to get some pretty clear ideas. We kind of know what it's going to look like, but not until it's approved by the ICC, we aren't going to be able to access these dollars until next March. So just thinking about that and wanting you to know that we are getting some pretty clear sense of how things are going to unfold. All right, I mentioned January 12th. Last thing I'll mention, this committee approved some goals for my position. I'd like to kind of do that update in October. Wanted to get it done today, didn't quite get there, but I will have it for us at committee of the whole a week from tomorrow, so I can share it with the whole board. I'll send it out in advance so everybody can have a look at that and ask me questions on the site. Thank you.
thank you. Anything else? Any old business, any future topics? We'll all jump at once? Okay. Can I have a, I know we do not have executive session. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
By Mr. Kern, second by Mr. Ejic. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.